Although Honda Japan rarely acknowledges it, HPD/Acura has had a strong presence in American endurance racing since the mid-2000s with their ARX series of prototypes. Numbering from ARX-01 to ARX-06, each car has permanently etched itself into the annals of racing history. The 01 was the first fully Acura badge prototype, doing battle with titans like Audi and Porsche. The 02 pioneered equal front and rear tire sizes and prototypes, exponentially increasing front grip potential. The ARX-03 was available to many customers and won the last season of the dearly departed American Le Mans series. The ARX-05 dominated DPI in the last years of its existence. Finally, the ARX-06 won the very first race of the GTP class in IMSA, solidifying a dynasty of motorsport excellence. There's something missing, isn't there? Wasn't there an ARX-04? The HPD ARX-04 was HPD's first entirely in-house, closed cockpit prototype. The car represented many first and last for American Honda prototypes. The 04 was the last car to be designed by Worth Research. Regulation-wise, it was one of the final cars intended for the 2011 to 2016 LMP2 rule set. The story of the HR28TT V6 ended here, as the car was the final Honda prototype to use the power plant. But enough about milestones. Let's get to what made this car tick and why HPD would prefer it to never have existed in the first place. HPD's ARX-03B was certainly a race car. The younger sibling of the ARX-03A that raced concurrently the LMP1 category, it was the second cella of the pincer attack that HPD made on the ACO's prototype categories. The ARX-03B perfectly exemplified the first wave of LMP2 cars for the then-new cost cap rule set. The constructor's old LMP car from a couple years ago, but cheaper. After all, it's really easy to take your old homework and put a new coat of paint on it. That's sort of how this channel started actually. I took an old term paper about Juvenicula's fishes, added extra details, injected memes, and read it out loud to some success. HPD's ARX-03B was born in a similar fashion. Take the design of the ARX-01G LMP2, which in turn is based off the ARX-01D, update the aero slightly, and bam, new car. Said engine is the aforementioned HR28TT V6, the only turbo engine used in the LMP2 category at the time. The ARX-03 Duo was the last of a lineage of prototypes dating back to 2007 with the Acura ARX-01, which was based off the Courage LC75 LMP2 that debuted the year prior. 8 years filled with success is a considerable amount of time, but HPD had squeezed all they could out of this chassis design. A fresh start was needed if they were to still have customers in the future. I might as well give the heart of the ARX-03B its own section, since the 04 used it as well before an upgrade. The etymology of this engine is fairly obvious. Honda Racing 2.8-liter twin turbocharged. Despite the name, the HR28TT has very pedestrian roots. Honda's J35 SOHC V6. The very same engine that rests under the hood of Odysseys, MDXs, and spicier Accords of yore. HPD probably went this route because the J35 is the largest engine Honda produced at the time, and it was cheap to make something out of. The engine size and aspiration were chosen out of cost control and ACO engine regulations. Turbocharged engines were allowed a maximum of 3.2 liters in displacement, so the engine had to be de-stroked if the turbo option was chosen. HPD could get the required power numbers of a naturally aspirated V6, but the engine would potentially be more fragile and expensive to produce. The 2.8-liter size was chosen because it allowed for the optimum plenum pressure for a turbocharged engine but not get robbed too much by the mandatory intake restrictors added to curb power output, since maximum allowed boost decreased as the engine displacement increased. Notably, the HR28TT used many road car engine parts, making any car using the engine a rolling stress test for the same parts you might find in your neighbor's MDX. As a single overhead cam engine, the HR28TT has fewer moving parts than the other LMP2 engines and a slightly lower center of gravity. Exchanged for fewer moving parts and less weight, the HR28TT sacrifices potential engine airflow compared to its dual overhead cam competitors, meaning less potential horsepower. The engine was intended to be a low-stress endurance unit for going maximum power to chase reliability and economy instead. You could even tell by how the car sounded, as it clearly didn't rev very high compared to every other car on the grid that didn't have a diesel engine. Official figures are hard to find. The HR28TT reportedly put out around 440 to 450 horsepower in final World Endurance Championship trim. Cars powered by this engine rarely top the timesheets compared to the more popular Nissan VK45DE V8, at least in the World Endurance Championship. In IMSA, the HR28TT was able to accept increased boost pressure, making cars powered by the V6 easier to adjust with balance of performance. Overall, the HR28TT was definitely an engine mounted in the back of some LMP2 cars. It was able to deliver some success to the more competent team using the engine, but wasn't the first choice for most teams and constructors. 2014 brought new cockpit safety regulations for LMP1, which LMP2 would have to follow by 2017. The drivers would have to sit in a more upright position, and the cars would be mandated to be 100mm narrower than they used to be. Despite the dimension change not being mandated immediately, a second wave of purpose-built LMP2 chassis came streaming in, some more impressive than others. Although not the oldest design in the field, the ARX-03 was starting to grow a little long in the tooth, and the successor was planned for 2015. Enter the HPD ARX-04, finally. Although the engine was nearly the same as its predecessor, the two cars could not look any more different. Reportedly, the car was put together very well, with excellent fit and finish. Worth Research's advanced CFD software certainly cooked up an interesting looking machine. Let's start with the front end. Like many contemporary prototypes, the ARX-04 sported upright front fenders to direct air away from the legality holes in the wheel arches. The inboard side of the front fender was largely flat until the rear section, where it moderately kinks inward. This lowered drag by reducing the turbulence and the airflow in past that section somewhat. The outboard side is more interesting, as an integrated vertical vane is placed just before the wheel arches, likely there to keep the air attached to the car's sides. The fenders also possess a pair of shallowly curved dive planes. The front splitter is of an open design, unlike its predecessor, with a mildly anhedral center section. The very edges of the splitter have two small fences to help guide air under the front. The space between the nose cone, which blends very elegantly into the cockpit region, is fairly stubby, giving the car a distinctive appearance. Speaking of cockpits, the ARX-04 has a roof. This is the biggest, most obvious difference between it and its predecessor. Le Mans prototypes in general were mandated to have roofs in the future, so the days of open cockpit prototypes were rapidly coming to a close. Roofs were also a big factor in the insurance policies of some amateur drivers. Open cockpits mean less rollover and flying debris protection. The pro-am nature of LMP2 means that many decisions made in the car's design are intended to make them user-friendly to non-professional drivers. The ARX-04 probably had the most striking looking cockpit, which resembled one of a jet fighter. Past the front fender, there's considerably less to talk about. The air from the front splinter vents out from a long and tall turning vane angled towards the car's flanks. Said flank is very flat and unsculpted, to the point where the car looks straight up unfinished. HPD trialed a new drive-by-wire and anti-lag system on the engine side, aiding drivability. Nothing too major though. At the back end of the car, the rear fenders were squarish, and the engine cover was fairly low, ending in a very abrupt burning at the back to increase downforce. Like many contemporary prototypes, the exhaust exits out of the engine cover, which apparently reduces noise. Overall, the ARX-04 definitely looked like the car that never saw the inside of a real wind tunnel. Because it didn't. All of its development took place on Worth and HPD's computers. Will the computer design challenger rise to the occasion? The first customer for HPD's new baby was Tequila Patron Extreme Speed Motorsports. ESM was a veteran team for the American Le Mans Series, and into 2015 with high hopes for the racing program. They were highly ambitious. A two-car effort in the World Endurance Championship would also be supplemented with an attempt at the Tequila Patron North American Endurance Championship. The ARX-04 would be their workhorse through all of this. Their ARX-03 effort was highly competitive in the American Le Mans Series and IMSA, so the ARX-04 had big shoes to fill. ESM would take the delivery of their first car late in 2014, with the second car not arriving until after the Roar at Daytona. ESM already reported struggling with myriad new car issues, so Daytona was said to be a learning experience. Car number 1 will be piloted by Scott Sharp, Ryan Dial, and David Heidemeyer Heinzen. Its stablemate will be wheeled by Ed Brown, John Fogerty, and Johannes van Overbeek. Both of these lineups were compromised in theory by the World Endurance Championship's requirement for an amateur driver in LMP2, though David Heidemeyer Hansen is actually competitive with professional drivers on pace. The other prototypes ESM raced against in IMSA had full pro lineups, so the AMs had to plan their drive time carefully and stay out of trouble caused by other cars. As mentioned in the lost LMP2, Daytona isn't the greatest place to judge overall speed on a generalized race circuit, since its layout favors cars with high top-end speed. However, Daytona's unique layout could excuse the lack of pace the car displayed in qualifying. Car number 2 clocked in at a sluggish 142.390, which was slower than the fastest LMP2. Car number 1 didn't manage to set a time, but it's not like it would have been much faster. It goes without saying that ESM was on the back foot for the second biggest race of the year. The race started with the number 1 car at the rear of the prototype grid in an attempt to do a last to first challenge. Car number 2 had to at least try to get around the lead LMP2. This proved to be a tough order for car number 2, as it hit oil pressure issues not even 2 hours into the race. At least the car was able to catch the rear of the non-Mazda prototype before the oil pump decided it wanted to quit pumping. 4 hours in, the ESM crew cut their losses and ended the run for car number 2. As for the sister car, it was at least able to see nightfall before the gearbox died. The car was at least able to improve in pace in the darkness and demonstrate its straight line strength. It even ran as high as 5th place until its untimely retirement. With that, ESM's 2015 Daytona experience came to an abrupt, though expected end. The ARX-04 burned to a crisp in its trial by fire. HPD and ESM needed to debug the car, and quickly if they expected to see any more ARX-04s running soon. Shortly after Daytona, HPD and ESM arranged a private test at Sebring with the ARX-03B and ARX-04 where the 03B proved slightly faster. The ARX-03B would therefore be pressed into service a couple more times as ESM and HPD worked to fix the ARX-04's numerous teething issues. Alas, HPD's wish never came to be, as ESM bought Ligier JSP2 for the rest of the WEC season. Honestly, I could end this video here. Double DNFing and getting replaced by your predecessor should send a clear enough message, but there are a couple more interesting footnotes in the lifespan of the ARX-04. First of all, HPD wasn't going to entirely abandon the 04 experiment, so they decided to take one to a place where they wouldn't have to worry about pesky Ligiers and Oricas being better value for money and scaring off potential customers. The Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. The PPIHC is one of the oldest continuously running motorsport events on the planet, and the premise is simple. Get up Pikes Peak in Colorado as quickly as possible. Even more notably, Pikes Peak has the Unlimited class with almost no rules. Besides, don't bring a death trap. Honda Performance Development has had significant presence at the hill climb for the past decade or so, and a modified LMP2 would be the perfect spearhead for that effort. The now late Justin Wilson would be called up to pilot the machine up the mountain. The ARX-04 would also be the first fully carbon fiber chassis machine sent up the mountain. Keep the word would in your short-term memory. The 2.8-liter HR28TT would be replaced with the new larger HR35TT, which saw IMSA usage in a Rally Daytona prototype and the Ligier JSP2s run by ESM and Michael Shank Racing. Unfortunately, reliability issues kept the ARX-04 from even taking a start of Pikes Peak, so it's completely unknown how quickly the car would have covered a 12-mile run. Even after exploding in practice for a one-off event, HPD was still determined to improve their cursed chariot. They needed another customer, somehow. Michael Shank Racing would answer that call. Sort of. Tier 1 Matthias and Motorsports also was interested in running the car, but the deal fell through at the last second. They raced in LMP2 that season. In the time between the Pikes Peak disaster and the end of 2015, HPD would attach a raft of updates to the ARX-04, in the hopes of landing a customer of some kind. The HR35TT engine would stay in the car, as it was more powerful than the 2.8-liter and was legal in IMSA. The Aero also gained some much-needed updates. After Daytona, HPD let the car see a wind tunnel for the first time in its life. The findings led to a massive revision of the front splitter and side pods, really just reverting them to a shape similar to those on the 03, and the bodywork was lowered to interact with the airflow better. Overall, these changes led to a 15% gain in front downforce in Daytona spec and 8% in Sebring spec, according to HPD. Front downforce was one of this car's Achilles heels, so honing in on this area should result in large gains for this car's performance. The car also had a significant amount of weight cut out of it, allowing it to finally meet the World Endurance Championship minimum weight of 900 kilograms, or 1,984 pounds. MSR tested the car at Sebring in March 2016, where Shank was rather impressed with the car. Not impressed enough to ditch the Ligier he ran that year, as it won Daytona. Unfortunately, the LMP2 rules for 2017 had been confirmed to limit the constructors to a measly 4, greatly annoying the constructors that didn't get picked and the fans. Worse for HPD, the car's monocoque was legal for the future rule set otherwise. Shank still kept the car to test the 2017 Continental tires for the new IMSA prototype class, giving the organization good feedback on what the class needed. With that, the story of the ARX-04 has come to a close. What the car could have done with the updates is firmly in the realm of the hypothetical. as the LMP2 marketplace will become somewhat like a cartel without the inflated prices in 2017. Worth Research would leave race car design for the foreseeable future and focus on using their CFD tech to improve building design. They seem to have had a hand in designing the air door, which is that air curtain you see in some buildings by the entrance. Michael Shank Racing would stick with Honda, running the then new NSX GT3 before moving up to the ARX-05 and ARX-06 prototypes with no little success. What they did at Daytona 2023 calls their successes into question, though. HPD skipped 2017 in the world of prototypes, returning in 2018 with the ARX-05 DPI, which also rekindled the relationship with Orica. ESM had a falling out with Honda, switching to Nissan to power their VGAs until their team folded with the sale of the Patron company to Bacardi, which really did not care to use racing as a form of marketing. PR1 with Dagys has run in LMP2 since 2017, seeing more success in the class after it split from DPI. As for the ARX-04s, Michael Shank Racing appears to still have theirs, which is chassis number 2, while chassis number 1 and the unraced 3 are apparently in the hands of a private collector. One thing's for sure, none of them will run in anger anytime soon. The ARX-04 at least played a minor role in the development of the IMSA DPI category before the car's untimely abandonment. HPD's ARX-04. What could have been?